In this video, we're going to be talking about the differences between non-vascular plants and vascular plants. So one of the main differences between the vascular plants and non-vascular plants are that vascular plants contain a xylem and a phloem. We learned about xylem and phloem in the vascular bundle when we were learning about a leaf anatomy and also about a plant anatomy. We saw how the xylem and phloem move through and transport nutrients and water that is necessary for the plant to survive. Non-vascular plants do not contain the xylem or phloem, or in other words, they don't contain the vascular bundle. However, they have a simpler way to be able to gain nutrients, and that is through absorption. They kind of act like a sponge if you think about it. Now let's look deeper into vascular plants. So these are further classified into gymnosperms and angiosperms. So we already talked about that in a separate video, but in summary, there are a few major differences between these two. Angiosperms use insects for reproduction, but gymnosperms use the wind that carries the pollen for reproduction. Also, angiosperms have enclosed seeds, but gymnosperms have naked seeds. Example would be shown over here. This is a gymnosperm because number one, the seeds are not enclosed and it has these pointy leafy leaves over here. Also, this over here is a conifer tree, and basically they make cones, which is just a very hard layer where they make the seeds and then the seeds drop down either through wind or through gravity. But this is basically where conifer cones come from. This is another gymnosperm example. The gymnosperms, like I said, they're conifer trees, and there are also different types of examples. But for angiosperms, there are monocots and dicots. Monocots are basically plants with one single cotyledon, but dicots, as the name suggests, they're ones with two different cotyledons. So basically, when we looked at different types of seeds, we talked about monocots and monocotyledons and dicotyledons. Not only comparing the cotyledons, but monocots have a parallel vein variation. So when we look at leaves, we typically see the veins, they move parallel to the midrib over here. But when we look at dicots, they completely branch out, meaning that the veins move in multiple different directions that are not parallel to the midrib. And lastly, when we look at the petals on a flower, for monocots, they come in multiples of 3, so there could be three petals, 6 petals, 9 petals, it goes on. But for dicots, they come in either multiples of 4 or 5, so there could be either 4 petals, 5 petals, 8 petals, 10 petals, it just goes on in the list. Although we talked about how most of the vascular plants follow these rules, there's one type of vascular plant that just doesn't seem to follow these rules, and that are ferns. Here they don't have flowers, they also don't produce seeds. Instead, what happens is the leaves that they have, it drops to the ground, and that's where the tree forms. Now, the only reason why ferns are actually considered vascular plants is because they have a stem and they have the vascular bundle. Okay, now let's move on to non-vascular plants. So like I said previously, non-vascular plants do not contain the vascular bundle, meaning they don't have xylem or phloem, which is used to which is basically used to transport the nutrients like glucose and water to different parts of the plant. Instead, they absorb it. So plants like mosses, hornworts, and liverworts all absorb it. And instead of using things like leaves to absorb it, they have a photosynthetic tissue that absorbs sunlight and water. And unlike most of the plants, which go straight up like this, they're completely spread out like grass. So if you were to look at like this, moss is completely spread out, hornworts completely spread out, and liverworts completely spread out. The reason why is because they have to expand their surface area to get the most amount of nutrients they can possibly receive. So that's why they spread out so much. Also, non-vascular plants are typically found in very moist and very shady areas. You can mainly find this in areas like swamps. However, vascular plants are found in a little bit more of a temperate or a little bit more of a drier or colder areas compared to non-vascular plants. This is all about non-vascular plants and vascular plants. In conclusion, vascular plants contain a xylem and phloem, or they have a vascular bundle, and non-vascular plants do not have xylem or phloem, or they don't have a vascular bundle. And vascular plants are able to split down into gymnosperms and angiosperms split down to monocotyledons and dicotyledons. Meanwhile, for non-vascular plants, they're just a various amount of examples that follow similar rules, they're very spread out, and they absorb through photosynthetic tissues. They absorb water and sunlight through photosynthetic tissues. And one special plant that's part of the vascular plants, however, does not follow a lot of the rules are ferns. They do not have flowers and they do not produce seeds. However, they have a stem and they contain the vascular bundle. Hence, they're part of the vascular plants.